I'm 13 years old, but for the last 2.5 years, I haven't gone to school. In fact, some of you may be able to call me a Panch Fee Pass. If any of you are shocked, don't worry. I'm really used to that. Because when I go and I meet a person for the first time, I introduce myself, and they always ask me 2 questions. What school do you go to, or what grade are you in, bacha? And when I tell them I don't go to school, they turn to my parents with sympathy and with shock because they think something is wrong with me. Well, I'm here today to tell you why I took this decision to leave school and how my journey has been over the last couple of years. I'd like to start at the very beginning of my story. I was born right here in Mumbai, and I grew up here, and I did actually go to school for many years. In fact, I enjoyed school. I did quite well in school. And during the holidays, I used to travel a lot, just like a lot of other families. But there was one trip in particular that changed my life forever. I was 8 years old, and we were heading to my 7th continent, Antarctica. I was so excited. We were going to be on this boat for almost 20 days, and we were traveling to some of the most remote and awe-inspiring places. It wasn't a cruise ship. It didn't have entertainment. The focus was on education and the environment. And we saw some incredible wildlife. We saw some beautiful landscapes. But the best part, for me, was getting to engage with the expedition crew. I may have just been 8 years old, but I was going and talking to the crew on board and my other fellow passengers, even when my parents weren't around. In fact, one morning, my parents woke up at 8 a.m. and they couldn't find me in our room. They looked, and they eventually found me here, attending a lecture on the geopolitics of Antarctica. I was raising my hand, asking questions. I was taking notes down, and this made my parents very happy, but also very surprised, because at home, I was a very shy and I was a very reserved kid. And this trip started to give them a lot of realizations. We barely came home, and my dad made a 60-slide presentation on why I should become a homeschooler. And at first, my reaction was no way. We started to have a lot of discussions for months on end, and soon I started to open up to the idea. I mean, which 8-year-old would say no to having no exams, right? But just as I started to get invested in the idea, COVID hit. And in 2020, I went to online school just like everyone else. In 2022, I had just returned to physical school. I had just won some competitions, I had just been elected as prefect, and most importantly, I was seeing my friends again after 2 years. So when my parents re-suggested the idea of me homeschooling, my reaction was pretty much no all over again. I thought there was no way I would leave my friends. So they said, okay, fine, we'll leave the decision up to you. And I started to think about it a lot. And I thought I would regret not taking an opportunity like this. But taking decisions like this can be very scary. And there were things that made it easier. My old school principal actually really supported this idea, and he said I can come back anytime up to a year if I didn't enjoy my journey. After that, it became a no-brainer to do this, and so in June of 2022, I went missing from school, as I like to call it. Of course, I've told you it's been 2.5 years since I started this journey, so I've obviously gone past that 1-year trial period. And that's because I've loved every single moment. except for when I'm fighting with my parents. That's a different story. Well, I'm here today to tell you 5 reasons why I've enjoyed this journey more than what traditional schooling could have offered me. Now, perhaps point number 1 can resonate with a lot of you. But in school, everyone has a favorite subject. And for me, that subject was English literature. My teacher used to give us some assignments that actually excited me. But just as I was starting to get interested in the lesson, the bell would ring, and the math teacher would walk in, ready to teach me about fractions and factors. That would really frustrate me, because just as my mind was buzzing with ideas, I'd have to completely shift gears. Now, I'm not in school anymore. Things are a little different. One of the first places we visited after I left school was the pyramids of Giza in Egypt. Coincidentally, it was also one of the last things I'd learned in my history class in school. The 4 ancient civilizations, Egypt being one of them, and they are the oldest period, or so I was told. But standing in front of the 4,500-year-old structures, it wasn't just facts in a textbook. History was coming alive in front of my eyes. In fact, my parents often tell people that I can't sleep on nights like this. Next places I visited after Egypt was North America, where I got to meet a lot of indigenous tribes. This lady on screen is a First Nation from Canada, and she's told me that her people had been living there for 10,000 years. In my mind, that's a lot more than 4,500 years old. So I became very curious. I started researching and reading, and soon I was reading about how humans have migrated across continents for tens of thousands of years. And from there, my curiosity just snowballed, and I soon developed an interest in anthropology. We started learning from the tribes of the Andamans that have been living there for 60, 70,000 years to this skeleton on screen, nicknamed Lucy. Lucy is 3.2 million years old. Compared to that, the pyramids really don't seem so ancient, do they? The point that I'm trying to make is that I've now been able to develop an interest in history and anthropology, and the only way I've been able to do that is because the bell rings when I'm ready for it to ring, and when I'm ready for it to move to my next subject. Now, perhaps a lot of you can relate to point number 2 as well. But back when I was in school, my mom had to remind me to do my homework 100 times. It was Kiaara homework karo, Kiaara homework karo. Mom, I get it. Now, before I start my story, I'd like to do a little audience poll. To the left of my screen is a deer, and to the right is a humpback whale. I want you to raise your hands if you think these two share anything in common. Right, they are both mammals, but can you believe that these two are evolutionary cousins in the same way that we humans are to baboons? I was really surprised, trust me. But the only reason I found this out is because I was doing a little research. You see, I've seen some amazing wildlife, from the jaguars of Brazil to the tigers here in our Indian forests. And at some point, I decided to do a classification of all the species I've seen in an Excel sheet. Here's the thing, no one forced me to do it. No one gave me this assignment. I did it only because I was curious and interested. And I started doing this 2 years ago. I used to spend hours on end, and I made a lot of surprising discoveries. I remember a lot of those still today. On the other hand, I was talking to a friend a few weeks ago, and she was telling me that she didn't remember something she'd learned 2 years ago, and she didn't even understand why she needed to learn it in the first place. To her, it was just about marks on a paper and forgetting when the exam was over. Speaking of exams, that brings me to point number 3. And it's not just exams, it's tests and tuitions and homework. My peers rarely have time to switch away from the pressures of school and focus on their deeper interests. I believe that because I don't go to school, I've had the time to explore many other opportunities. And I'd like to use the example of literature festivals. We're lucky that here in India, we have some of the best lit fests in the world. And some of my biggest and most inspirational moments have come from attending these events in the last year alone. But some of these happened during the school term, and my friends just wouldn't have the time to attend this. I'd like to show you a few people I've met at these lit fests. This is William Dalrymple. He's a historian and one of my favorite non-fiction authors, and he's also the curator of the Jaipur Lit Fest. Here at the Mumbai Lit Fest, I've gotten to talk to a professor of history at the University of Oxford called Peter Frankopan, and I asked him if someone like me, who doesn't go to school, can get the chance to go to a top university. And his answer was quite reassuring. I've also gotten the chance to engage with people like Dr. Shashi Tharoor. And I'm very interested in geopolitics and world affairs, so this was so exciting for me. And just a few weeks ago here in Mumbai, I attended a lesson and a lecture given by Dr. Jane Goodall, who at 90 years old was talking about her life's work. And that was really special. But I can go on with countless examples, and not just at literature festivals, but the point is that some of the experiences and some of the learnings that I've had out there in the real world, you just can't find in a classroom. While we're on the topic of classrooms, how many of you have been lectured for dreaming in class? Pretty much all of us, right? Well, guess what? I can dream in my classroom. I can follow my passions. When I was just 10 years old, I discovered what my favorite species in the world was, and that's sea turtles. I had just discovered the importance of sea turtles. I had just understood about how few of them survived to make it to adulthood when I saw one that had lost its flipper due to a fishing accident. And that really hit hard. But it also left me desperate to know more. And since then, we've done a lot so that I can deepen my understanding. We once drove maybe 8 or 9 hours to a village here in Maharashtra called Velas so that I could see these tiny baby turtle hatchlings enter the water for the first time. We've also visited places like sea turtle hospitals and conservation centers for me to understand how we humans have endangered this species. And now, I don't just love turtles anymore. I also love the ocean and everything in it. We visited places like Sassundox, which may not seem like a big deal, but for me, it was a chance to explore and understand how fishing has impacted marine life. And I've also discovered that the best way for me to observe marine life is while diving. My mom and I are now advanced scuba divers, and the ocean has become my happy place. But for me, diving isn't just about fun. We've done programs so that I can understand how climate change has impacted coral reefs, and I'm now certified to conduct surveys underwater. Doing all this has helped me understand the marine ecosystems and wildlife that I love so much. And now I'm not just talking about sea turtles or whale sharks and mantas, because all that's really amazing to see. But even the small, tiny animals like the sea slug on screen that are just as important. And you don't even need to go diving or snorkeling to see all this fascinating marine life. Right here, I've gone on countless shore walks in Bandra and at Juhu Beach to go on shore walks, and you can see some incredible stuff. From crabs to anemone to coral to octopus. What I'm trying to say is that if I had gone to school, I wouldn't have had the chance to go on so many shore walks. I wouldn't have had the chance to go on almost 50 dives. I wouldn't have had the chance to focus on the things that I love to do. And that brings me to my point number 5. Because I've talked about how curiosity has driven my learning. I've talked about how I've gotten to focus on my interests. And what I haven't talked about is friends. Because one of a homeschooler's biggest concerns is their social life. And at times, I've got to admit, it's been tough. My school friends just went on a 4-day school trip to Coorg, and I was looking at pictures and I felt really sad for missing out. But homeschooling does have its advantages when it comes to your social life as well. I'd like to show you a few examples. Last summer, I spent 3 weeks on this boat. I was without my parents, which was kind of a nice experience for me, and I didn't even have my mobile phone. I was in the middle of the ocean without anyone I knew. But I wasn't alone. I was with 12 other 13-year-olds, and we were diving and learning how to sail and cooking and cleaning and having so much of fun. Like I said, none of us knew each other from before, but we soon became like family. And I've done a lot of other residential programs just like this. I've attended horse riding camps near Pune, and I've even had experiences like acting on stage at the Royal Opera House, which, while rehearsing and while constantly practicing, I made friends. In fact, even while doing swim meets and training and practicing for swim competitions, I've made friends. A few months ago, I went for 1 month to an outdoor learning school in Bali, and we were a group of kids from the UK and Germany and Italy and the Philippines and Korea. But we were all working together to do projects and learn in the community. This is me with them. Now, I'm obviously still grateful for the friends that I have, that I used to go to school with for so many years, and they're still a big part of my life. But I now also have friends from all across the world and from different backgrounds. I'm still in touch with a lot of them today. While those friends that I went to school with for so many years are going to be going to 9th grade in a few months, and I'm still a Panchvi pass. I hope with these 5 points, I've been able to show you not just how I've learned when I'm not in school, but how I've gotten to experience the joy of learning. Because as my favorite Hindi movie says, Zindagi na milegi dobara. Dhanyavad. Now, I'd like to invite the people who made this possible, my parents and my fellow learners, Danielle and Naveen Arana.